committee will take up the bills in order posted on the agenda. Our hearing today is your public part of the legislative process. This is your opportunity to express your position on proposed legislation before us today. Committee members may come and go during the hearing. This is just part of the process. They have bills to introduce in other committees. I ask you to abide by the following procedures to better facilitate today's meeting. Please silence or turn off any cell phones or electronic devices. Please move to the reserved chairs when you're ready to testify for the bill that you're here to testify on. These are the two chairs in the front. Today shouldn't be a problem. We don't have enough testifiers. Make it an issue. The introducing senator will make the initial statement, followed by proponents, opponents, those in the initial testimony. Closing remarks are reserved for the introducing senator. If you're planning to testify, please pick up one of the green sheets in the back. Have it filled out clearly and legibly. Bring it forward when you get ready to testify and give it to either the committee clerk or one of the pages. If you do not wish to testify but would like a record of your being here at the hearing, there's a white sheet that will afford you the ability to indicate whether you're here as a proponent, opponent, or in the neutral. If you have handouts, we'll need 10 copies. If you don't have 10, notify the pages. We will get you copies. If you've come to testify, we've asked that you would speak clearly into the microphone, state your name, then spell both your first and last name. We will be using the light system here today. You'll have 5 minutes, 4 minutes, green light, 1 minute the yellow, and then when it turns red, you're done. No displays of support or opposition to a bill, local or otherwise, will be allowed. This is a public hearing. Committee members with us today. We will start on my right with Senator Raybould.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Raybould, Legislative District 28 in the heart of Lincoln.
Good afternoon, Rita Sanders, representing District 45, the Bellevue Offutt community.
And I'm Ray Aguilar, District 35, Grand Island.
John Lowe, District 37, Gibbon, Shelton, and Kearney.
Steve Halloran, District 33, Adams County, Kearney County, and Phelps County.
Megan Hunt, District 8, and I represent the northern part of Midtown Omaha.
Dick Clark, Legal Counsel for the Government Committee. Julie Connon, our committee clerk. Senator Sanders is the vice chair, and our pages today are Logan and Audrey. All right, now we will welcome up Senator Clements to introduce LB 390. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer and members of the Government, Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. I'm Senator Rob Clements, ROB, CLEMENTS. I represent Legislative District 2, and I'm here to introduce the Legislative Bill 390. LB 390 was brought to me by our Secretary of State to improve processes and logistics of early ballots to be mailed to voters, to clarify duties and requirements for voter agents, and improve security of voting by agent. LB 390 amends Section 32808 and 32943 of the Election Act. Changes in 32808 shorten the time period early ballots are to be available from at least 35 days to not more than 30 days prior to an election. Harmonizing this time period with the current 30-day period for obtaining a ballot in person, laid out in 32942. The rationale for making these time periods align is logistical. Ballots must be certified by the Secretary of State 50 days before an election. Having two ballot delivery deadlines, 35 and 30 days prior, has created some logistical printing and delivery problems with ballot availability, especially as early voting has become more and more popular. Ensuring these time periods align provides 20 days rather than only 15 days to the Secretary and election offices to prepare and mail early ballots to voters. Secretary of State Evans may have more details related to the problems they have faced. LB 390 also clarifies the duties and restrictions for voter agents found in section 32-943. Voter agents are returning ballots to election offices on behalf of voters, but this is currently not clear in the law. This bill clarifies that an agent may return a voted ballot to the election office on behalf of an early voter. LB 390 would also exclude an agent from being a voter's employer or the agent of such employer. It continues to limit a person to act as an agent for no more than 2 early voters. The white copy amendment I am providing, AM 233, added the requirement that agents sign the ballot envelope in addition to the voter's signature. This will help ensure that a person is serving as an agent for no more than 2 early voters, whether they hand in the ballot in person or deposit it in a drop box. The amendment also allows the Secretary of State to promulgate rules for the returns of ballots by agents to ensure the law is followed. Let me summarize the provision to the Election Act found in LB 390 as amended. 1, shorten the time period ballots to be mailed or to be available from at least 35 days to no more than 30 days prior to an election. Clarify that an agent may return a voted ballot to the election commissioner on behalf of a registered voter. 3, excludes an agent from being a voter's employer or the agent of such employer. 4, the white copy amendment, AM 233, requires that the agent, in addition to the voter, sign the envelope of the returned ballot. LB 390 would harmonize early ballot availability time periods and make some security improvements for voting by agent. I thank you for your consideration of LB 390. The Secretary of State will be following me, but I'll try to answer any questions at this time. And Mr. Chairman, I've got my own committee to get back to, so I do not plan to close.
Okay, so we're close. Senator Clements, real quick. This was handed out. Is this an example of
Yes,
what a
that's a sample form
re-engineered?
for requesting an early ballot application. The Secretary of State has this form. This is a suggested form. It's not the required form. Other election offices could have something similar, but it shows the signature of voter or agent and printed name of the agent. So in the event if there is an agent requesting the ballot, that's provided for on this form.
Let's see. All right, let's see if we have some questions for you. Questions for Senator Clements? Yes, Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. So this bill saying that, to take an example, if I was returning the vote by mail ballots to a drop box of my mom and dad and my brother, would that be illegal under this bill? Because it would say the agent can't act for more than 2 voters.
I think the way I'm reading it is, yes, you have yourself and 2. I think you can do your own, but 2 others would be your limit.
So if my
besides yours.
household was my mom and dad and my brother, I couldn't take everyone's ballots with me. We'd have to go 2 trips or,
You could only be the agent for 2 of them.
okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Rabel.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements. I know yesterday we heard testimony from nursing homes and other assisted living facilities. And typically they help the residents of that home when they vote. And they collect all the ballots, and probably one person takes them to the election commissioner's office or the mailbox outside there and assist in depositing them there. So it sounds like that would be in a big violation there.
I think they're not being the agent. They're not requesting the ballot as an agent. The voter themselves asks for an early ballot, and the voter themselves are signing the envelope. It'd be a good question for the secretary, though. But I think that there is a distinction there. This is The two ballot limit is if you're acting as the agent requested the ballot, the agent's returning the ballot. But I'd like to defer to
Clarification.
the secretary.
All right, so
I have another question. So it looks like on the envelopes, we're adding, or is this something that's already been done? It says voter signature, and then below it, it says agent signature if applicable. So that means that'll be going on the new envelopes?
Yes, that has not been on the envelope in the past. If a agent is returning it to an election office, the election office has notice of who returned that. But if it's going into a drop box, without the signature, they weren't sure who would return the ballot. So the agent's signature on the envelope is to help for tracking who has returned it.
So this is only for those voters who work with an agent, correct?
Yes,
So for example, I see my office, my BNR office is so close to the Lancaster County Election Commissioner's office. And I see vehicle after vehicle line up to just drop it in the mailbox. So I could probably gather, my neighbors and a few others, and on my way to work, I would drop them in the box. And I'm not their agent. I'm just a neighbor helping them out because it's right on the way to work. I assume I'm not violating any
I don't
rules.
see a restriction to that, but
Oh, okay.
I'd like to defer to the secretary as well
Okay,
for the
sounds great.
details.
Oh, I have one more question. Okay. So I'm reading the Nebraska early voting ballot application, and I'm trying to do the math in my head, and I'm a little bit slow after lunch. It says you must submit your application to have a ballot mailed to you by the close of business on the second Friday before the election. So no later than the second Friday before the election. Is that how?
Yes,
So that's really only
that's,
15 days?
that's current, my bill is not changing that. That's
Okay,
current rule.
okay. So we can have that Secretary of State clarify that.
all right, additional questions for Senator Clements? All right, thank you, and waiving close.
I wait close.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
All right, we will invite up our favorite elected official, because you come visit us more than anyone else,
That's right.
whether you want to or not. Please have a seat. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Bob Evnen, B-O-B-E-V-N-E-N. I have the honor and privilege of serving as Nebraska's Secretary of State. I want to express my thanks and appreciation to Senator Clements and the 10 co-sponsors of LB 390. I will quickly summarize what you've already heard. This bill will codify existing practice that early ballots that are mailed are done by non-forwardable first-class mail. So if it isn't deliverable to the address it's written, it's not going to be forwarded. And that's the current practice. It'll be codified into statute if LB 390 is adopted, as I hope it will be. The bill harmonizes the date for both the start of early ballots to be mailed and the start of in-office early voting, and that would be 30 days prior to the election. It limits an individual agent to only return 2 early voting ballots other than their own. So you could not drop off a bunch of people that you would collect at BNR and your office of BNR, which is close to the drop box, but you would not be able to do that. You would be limited to 2. And it also clarifies that a person who's a candidate or who is serving on a campaign committee or an employer agent of such a person can't serve as an agent to request to return an early ballot on behalf of a voter unless they are a member of the registered voter's family. And this, by the way, this return aspect of things is in parity with what we already have, which is as an agent, you can only request a ballot for yourself and 2 other people. So this provides parity now that you can only request a ballot for yourself and 2 other people. Now you can also only return a ballot for yourself and 2 other people. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I would also say that following me will be Deputy Secretary of State Wayne Benna of the Elections Division. And it could very well be that I will, number one, anything I say is subject to correction by the deputy. And number 2, I may just outright defer on depending on what your questions are.
All right. We will see if we have any questions. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Hello, Secretary Ebnen.
Good afternoon, Senator Hunt.
Thanks. So if the scenario I was describing earlier, if I live in a household with my mom and my dad and my brother, and I take all 3 of their ballots, so 4 ballots from my household to the drop box at the election commissioner, am I legally an agent, or am I only an agent if I filled this out and requested to get all the ballots for them in the first place?
You're an agent if you take ballots back for anybody other than yourself.
Okay.
You're an agent for those other people. And, my suggestion would be take your brother with you.
Okay, what if my brother is homebound or serving in the military or working or watching my child so that I can take their ballots?
Yeah, the restriction here would be you could return your ballot and 2 others.
Okay, and it doesn't matter if I have identified myself as an agent in advance by filling this form out.
I'm going to defer to Wayne for that.
Okay,
But if you are returning a ballot for people who are other than yourself, you are their agent.
okay. I don't see a definition of agent in this bill. Do you know if there's a definition of that would apply to this bill elsewhere in statute?
I don't know.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Senator Riggle.
I wanted to follow up on some of the scenarios that we're giving, because I think the practice is if I have a neighbor that's not an employee, if I have a neighbor, I can take their ballot and I'm not their registered agent. I'm just a neighbor because they may have broken their hip and I can take it and drop it off on the way to my office. And I know the language said if it's not signed by an agent, it invalidates the ballot. But the question is like, how's the election commissioner going to know? Because I'm going to put it in the Dropbox. How are they possibly going to know what the difference is? Or do they have surveillance cameras and I just picked it up from my neighbor? And, how are they going to even know?
Well, I guess they're counting on you performing your duties as a citizen honestly.
Yeah.
But there are mechanisms in different places where it can be checked. But the fundamental aspect of it would be that if you are dropping off a ballot for someone else, that you'd fill out your name and sign it.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah Conrad.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Good to
I'm
see
sorry,
you, Mr.
Senator, could I-
Secretary. Of course.
Could I?
Yeah.
The other thing that how could you know? I'm not sure how you would know. I would think there are mechanisms, but there also is this, and that is it's a violation of law. It's a violation of the Elections Act, and it's a Class 4 felony to do it.
To do what?
To act as an agent without acknowledging it. All right, I apologize, Senator. I apologize for the interruption.
No. That's helpful. I always give any colleague an opportunity to complete their thought. I appreciate that. But I think I'm sensing some of the same confusion with my colleagues here, and we can defer to get some technical information from Wayne if that's your preference, Mr. Secretary. But I think the confusion I'm sensing is around the current law regarding agents and Senator Clements' measure, which you're here in support of, which basically seeks to extend the current framework about agents to utilization of ballot boxes or otherwise. Is that kind of a fair assessment? So I think maybe we're just talking past each other for like what the current legal framework is for the limited instances where people can serve as an agent. And then Senator Clements' proposal that you're supporting basically kind of tries to use that framework for returns utilizing ballot boxes or otherwise. Is that fair? Is that maybe what I'm sensing is people are confused about?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not sure what people are confused about, Senator, but yes, this is extending your explanation of it is, I believe, is correct.
Okay.
It's
Well,
extending
maybe.
the agency requirements in obtaining ballots
Uh-huh.
to returning ballots as well.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe what would be helpful is to go back to the kind of 101 level here. So, Mr. Secretary, if you would explain to us the current law regarding the use of agents to facilitate
Under
somebody's
current,
able to vote.
certainly, and I'll invite
Please.
Deputy
And Wayne
Secretary.
can help us out.
I will
Yeah.
invite Deputy Secretary Bennett to clarify, if not correct, anything that I'm saying. Under current law, if you wish to obtain a ballot for others,
Yes.
you indicate that when you go in to request the early
Yes.
ballot, and you are serving as that person's agent in requesting the ballot.
Right.
That's current law.
And it's utilized, I think, in pretty narrow, specific circumstances, kind of like Senator Raybould was talking about, as long as I'm not a part of a candidate committee or
Right.
some other things that I can help out a few folks if they designate me to run to the election commissioner's office, grab their ballot for them, they fill it out, and then I take it back for them. Kind of, that's how the current agent program kind of works, right?
Yes, and this, the current agent program stops at you obtain the ballot. So this extends the current agent process to the return of the ballot as well.
Oh, okay. I understand your perspective on it. I'm not sure I agree 100%, but I think I understand where you're at, and maybe we can pick it up with Wayne too. But I think that there is maybe just a confusion about how the current law works regarding agents, and then how Senator Clements' proposal would seek to perhaps extend that. And I see it as attempting a parallel approach. That may not be a fair assessment, but I think we're just getting a little confused for how the current agent law works, and then what this proposal does, which I think is, it sounds kind of innocuous on its face, but it's actually, I think, a pretty significant restriction on the ability of people to utilize drop boxes, which I'm concerned about. So, and I think the agent component in current law is very different than what we're seeing in this. But I'll keep an open mind and keep talking about it. But.
I would invite you to ask Mr. Bennett.
Okay.
Okay, Senator Rabel?
I think I will take your advice. And ask
Let's just
Mr.
leave
Bennett
it
my
at that.
question.
Everybody's waiting.
Thank you, Senator.
Waiting to talk to Mr. Bennett. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you,
All right.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
All right, with that said, we're going to welcome up Wayne Bennett. Thank you for taking the time to come see us, even though you were slightly committed.
I have 1 minute, right?
You have as much time as you want, I guarantee that. All right, welcome to the Government Committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer, members of the committee. My name is Wayne Bennett, W-A-Y-N-E-B-E-N-A. I serve as Deputy Secretary of State for Elections here on behalf of Secretary of State Robert Ebnen in support of LB 390. As you've heard from Senator Clements and the Secretary of the Policy, I am always here to help you with the administration of said legislation in any given capacity. And that is what I've been here to do. No arm twisting whatsoever. I'll leave it at that. And 3 in a row, I'll answer any questions that you may have. And 3 in a row, I have not hit the yellow light. So with that, I will answer your question.
All right, thank you, and we'll get started here.
That's
I'm
very
looking
good.
to my right. Senator Conrad, please.
Thank you so much, Senator Brewer. Good to see you again, Wayne. Okay, let me start at the 101 level. Can you help to explain to the committee and for the record how the existing agent program works under current law?
Correct.
Thank
So a spouse comes into the election office, wants to maybe vote in the office themselves, maybe take the ballot home with them. While they are there, they fill out an application, the one that you have there, that is our current application. They, instead of the signature for the voter, you fill out the agent's signature. It's then logged into our voter registration system that the spouse picked up, or it could be a friend, whoever, logs that name into the system. A ballot is then prepared for them to take away with them. It can be a spouse. I've had a friend.
Yep.
I even had on election night, a nurse felt so badly for a patient that just went to the hospital. On her break, came and got a ballot for her patient. It was the restriction in that case is you can be an agent for only 2 individuals. So if you're coming in, you could get it for your spouse and your 18-year-old child. If you had 2 children, you could only do it for 1. Okay. So that's the agent process in regards to, I call it checking out a ballot. Okay.
Right.
For a voter.
Good analogy.
Okay.
Right.
But the
That-
return,
there are no limitations in return right now at all. However, what I will tell you is that in practice, when said spouse comes back with that ballot and their own, okay, it is logged as a in-person return for the person who was there, and it's an agent return for the person that was the other person that was not them. And most people ask, oh, is one of these your ballot and one of these someone else's? They say yes, and that's how they're logged into the system. Currently under the law, you can turn in 100 ballots if you want to. And I think what you've heard from Senator Clements and the Secretary and possibly other testifiers is when you have an early ballot, you tend to, and give it to somebody else, you lose some of that security in regards to that ballot, possibly when you give it to someone else. We always say use a trusted source. So there are no restrictions. And what the policy that this is saying is that a person can only return a ballot for 2 people and only 2 people. So while there's not a policy now, that's what this legislation is looking to do, is to start a policy of you can only return 2 ballots.
Right, because under current law, if I, as a voter, request a vote by mail, early ballot, it's up to me how it's returned, right? I can mail it back. I can utilize a drop box. I can give it to a friend or neighbor who's running errands or offers to take it in. That's really, I maintain the agency as the voter for how it's returned. And your Senator Clements' proposal that you're here supporting today basically severely restricts that agency as a voter to only allow a person to return up to 2 ballots to a drop box or in any other way, shape, or form.
That is the policy
Okay.
request.
I definitely appreciate and understand that. I'm skeptical about the legislation, and we've talked about this many times in the past. I think it is unfortunate and disappointing that it perpetuates issues and narratives around the big lies surrounding the most recent or the previous presidential election, and I think that it also really undercuts the ability of people to vote. And again, kind of perpetuates this false narrative around what the secretaries called ballot harvesting in the past, which I think is a common practice to help people return their votes. I will take the secretary at his word, and I know that you always carry out the same. We absolutely should make it hard to cheat and easy to vote. And I see this as a way to make it harder to vote. So I appreciate your clarity and kind of laying out existing law and kind of what the proposal would do, but I think I'm gaining a better understanding through this dialogue, which is exactly how the process is supposed to work, to understand what's happening with this legislation. So thank you, Wayne. You're always a great source. Appreciate it.
Okay, Senator Rabel.
So following the scenario of this new proposal, so like I said, my office is close to the election commissioner. I get my ballot, I sign and be the agent for my husband. I pick up his ballot. He's out of town. I leave it there for him to vote. I go out of town. But I would be obligated by the change in this law, since I was the registered agent that picked it up, I'd have to also sign it. That's what it says here.
Any agent would have to sign the ballot that returns it on behalf of the voter, not necessarily the person that picked it up. It just require an agent's signature, so the agent would sign that on there. Is the proposal. So it does not have to be the same person that picked up the ballot that dropped it off, but if you're having someone else drop it off for you, they would sign the ballot envelope.
Okay, so when you check it to see, okay, the agent that signed out for it was me, but it can be a different agent that returns it.
Correct.
And if I checked it out for my husband, and since he's not always good at following directions, he signs it and just
Is that
drops
on
it.
the record now?
This is on the record. So he signs it, but he doesn't have the agent that checked it out for him sign it. He just drops it off without an agent's signature on that.
That doesn't matter because it's
It
his own
doesn't
ballot.
matter.
It's his own, at that point, it's his own ballot and he's returning his own ballot. So that's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Senator Hutton.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Bennett, for being here. Can you speak, Secretary Edmond was asked something similar, but can you speak to the enforcement of this bill? I mean, we have poll watchers, we have these self-appointed vigilantes who go house to house in Lincoln knocking to see if the people who live there are the people who voted, these types of like personal detective work type things. How is this going to be enforced? And are we going to put cameras by the drop boxes? I feel like we've had people come up and testify before that they think all these things should be surveilled, if not completely done away with. Or, I mean, can we expect people standing around the drop boxes, checking people's ballots before they get put in the box? Like, how will this be enforced?
That's a great question. I mean, I know, right now we track the people that check out ballots. And so we will know if someone is breaking the law that's checking out too many ballots for an individual. We would, if they are following the law and signing the envelope, we would know if we do this signature, which Senator Clements has now done a white copy amendment, we would most likely have to do that same kind of tracking system or voter registration system. Doesn't mean the person's going to sign it or not. I understand what you were saying, but I guess in regards to any law or an enforcement of the law, someone would have to notify
Make a complaint.
I liken it to, in its simpler form, there are speed limits.
Mhm.
You and I drive I-80 every day. Everybody's not going 75, but there are police officers that are
I do
pulling
get
you over.
caught, I will say. I've been caught many times. But if I went to your drop box outside your
So
election
someone
commissioner with my dad's ballot, my mom's ballot, my brother's ballot,
I would say
could I
is
expect to become a felon?
90 out of our 93 counties, they only have one drop box and it's outside of the courthouse.
Right.
Many of our courthouses do have cameras on them, not required, but they do. Or they have people that are just walking around and someone might see someone putting multiple ballots in a ballot box and may say something about it. So like any law, someone would have to catch that person or report that person that something suspicious was going on, which in the election process, whether it's this or anything else, we want people to report things that may be an abnormality. So
I just have the concern that this is veering too much into validating conspiracies around election fraud that don't exist, and also veering into encouraging a culture of intimidation around voting. It's already happening. Like, people are already coming to people's personal homes as unelected, unappointed, unaccountable, residents of our state demanding to know how people voted and who lives in the house. And I don't think anything would stop them from doing the exact same thing around drop boxes. And I don't think I'm giving anybody any ideas. I think that they're excited to do this. And so I would hate for the legislature to be responsible for encouraging that type of intimidation of voters. And I would hate for the Secretary of State's office to be, endorsing that. So thank you.
I understand your perspective. I mean, this is again, one of those policy decisions that the legislature can make that we would have to put into effect. Happy to answer any questions, but I will say this is not the first state to do something like this. So this isn't brand new. Other states do have similar type of restrictions on ballots being returned.
I have one other quick question on that.
Yeah.
Is this from the mind of Senator Clements, or was this brought to him by the Secretary of State?
It was brought by the Secretary of
Okay,
State's office.
thank you.
Senator Conrad.
Follow-up. Thank you, Wayne. I think that maybe similar measures have been introduced in years past, maybe even in Nebraska. And I remember kind of engaging in the process during that time. Maybe they had a slightly different iteration to them, but kind of trying to get after the same kind of policy decision that you mentioned. And I remember there was a great deal of discomfort amongst committee members with, really cutting off any sort of opportunities, particularly for elderly residents and congregate living to return their ballots. Is that kind of generally your recollection in terms of some of the issues and similar past proposals?
I believe that's on one side, but you can also, on the other side of that, there are folks that would report to our office, our county election offices, possible influence at the same type of nursing home facilities or what have you. Are they collecting ballots from individuals that they shouldn't be collecting them from in the first place? Was it requested? Things that have been brought to our attention were ballots requested on behalf of a voter in the correct manner, and they were returned in the said correct manner. So there's both sides but we do hear about retirement homes and nursing home facilities of whether or not there's undue influence in regards to the requesting, voting, and returning of a ballot. So.
Okay, I'm not sure that's exactly responsive to my question, and maybe that's a separate and distinct.
What I'm saying is
issue
I
that we
agree
need
with
to-
what you said on your end, but there's also on the other end, the thought of collecting at these same facilities could be of collecting multiple ballots that weren't intended and wanted to be collected in the first place.
Okay. So let's just dial that back for a second. So, but under existing law, there would be penalties for unlawful influence of a voter's choices or request for ballots or return for ballots. I mean, no one can just willy-nilly meddle with an individual's right
There
to
are laws,
vote,
yes.
right?
Correct.
So
There are laws.
if there are in fact bad actors who are breaking the laws in congregate living situations like nursing homes, whether that's, I don't know if you're implying staff or otherwise, that would be kind of news to me. And your office, I'm assuming, is investigating those kinds of
It would be
reports.
done on the local. They'd be done on the local level. I have heard anecdotal evidence of this. I'm being very clear. I will go to a meeting and speak, and someone will say, "Well, what about nursing homes? Couldn't they just request a ballot for a person and take it back?" I'm saying there is that mindset that could happen there.
Okay, so you're not saying that it is happening. You're saying that this is just kind of part of questions that have been posed in the past. Okay. Okay.
Now,
That's,
as being the former Sarpy County Election Commissioner, have I had nursing home employees bring back 50 ballots from the residents of their facility? Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's pretty
And
common
some,
practice.
I would say that there are some that wonder if that should be a legitimate practice. Should they be doing that? Is the policy that this law is looking to have the discussion?
Okay, I understand and appreciate that. The other instance of high that I think President Trump was having a rally in Omaha, and Secretary Ebnen was with campaign officials to collect ballots. Isn't that accurate? I mean, I think it's pretty well documented in the press from a few years ago.
My recollection of that is, again, at that point, it was not illegal, and there was nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But I think the secretary wanted some guardrails around that as well, because of that. So
Okay.
I think they wanted to make sure that the people that were turning ballots in at that event, those ballots did get back to the election offices, is my recollection. But at that point, I mean, that it was not something that was unlawful. So
Right. That's 100% right. So the main kind of instances in Nebraska where we've seen people facilitating the return of early ballots has been generally in nursing homes and then at one campaign rally a few years ago. Is that kind of your general assessment of kind of how this works in practice?
in returning, I mean, anyone can return anyone's ballot, or, any registered voter can grab someone else's ballot, even from, I've had folks when I was election commissioner call me like, I have a friend who's really sick in another county. Can I get a ballot on their back? Yeah, if you drive out to that county election office, you can.
Exactly.
So there's many different situations, and it's not very limited. I will say agent ballots during the early voting period out of my office were quite regular.
Sure.
The majority are spouses and kids of the person coming in, but it is not a limited practice.
Okay, last question, and I'm really done. And I so appreciate you sharing your knowledge about kind of how this works in practice. And I think it's been well publicized that the secretary and your office have done really very extensive, I think, analysis about our recent elections in Nebraska and have demonstrated that there's little, if any, voter fraud or malfeasance happening in our elections. Is that kind of a fair assessment of things? I've read most of the reports, and I know they're lengthy and detailed, but
I will go to the two that are the most recent. Is that we, listen to this committee, and we're in that we in the past it has been difficult to produce a list of people that voted in a particular election, given the timelines of the election certification and opening up the voter registration system to allow people to continue to register. So listening to those concerns, and I know Senator Halloran, you asked the secretary point blank, can we do this? And so we went to a lot of work with our county election officials to have voter history put into the voter registration system first, before we canvass the election and open up the voter registration system. And so the difference between the people that received voter history and the number of ballots counted was the difference was, I believe, at that 0.04 of 1% difference between the two thousandths, of 1%. The second thing that was done was that we expanded our manual audit of 10% of the precincts statewide, including one precinct in all 93 counties. And in that, there were only 11 ballot discrepancies on particular one races. 5 of those were mostly attributed to a light mark that the voter didn't follow the instructions to highlight, do the oval, and the canvas board decided that probably was a vote when the machine thought it was too light. There were a few ballots that we knew existed that probably got misfiled in our larger county in another box that they just couldn't find, and it was taking too long. So that was 25,000th of 1% error rate. So listening to concerns that people have had, we've expanded those efforts to be transparent and show we should have confidence, and our elections can be a guide for other states on how to do it.
Yeah, I thank you so much for refreshing my recollection in that regard. I remember reading the PowerPoint and the reports, and I think that really underscores my skepticism in looking at this measure, is that your office has done extensive analysis that the existing law, with all of its safeguards, has produced safe, secure, really, maybe not error-free, but relatively error-free elections. And that's a credit to our strong laws, our hardworking election officials, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, additional questions for Mr. Bennett, Sergeant Lowe. Senator Lowe.
Thank you for the promotion. Thank you, Wayne, for being here. And how will the general public know that they can only turn in their one ballot plus two others? Will it be printed on the envelope or something like that, the notification?
Yeah, and also, each ballot includes instructions put in, and we can have the county election offices add that to the instructions that you're only allowed to someone to return only a ballot. You can only return a ballot for two people, so that's an easy addition.
Just for clarification and everything.
All right, so Rabel.
So if I return my own ballot, do I have to sign the new line that says agent as well?
No.
No. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other sergeant? Sorry. Senator Halloran.
Private would be just fine. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Wayne, for being here. So how, again, refresh me at least, how many drop boxes are there in the state?
There's a good question. Minimum 93, and then you add one extra in Stanton County. You add 4 more in Sarpy County, and Brian has 12 additional on top of that. So 93, 94, 99, 102, probably about 104, 105.
Okay. And the ones that are at the courthouse are, more monitored, if you will. Some of them have cameras, as you say, just as a general security for the courthouse. But for those drop boxes that aren't at a courthouse, how do we know if people drop 10, 12, 15, 20?
I know Douglas County, all 12 of theirs have cameras on them in some form or fashion. There's not necessarily all 93 counties they have cameras at their courthouse. If some have it directed towards the area of their drop box, some may not. The others, I believe, are at places that could have cameras, but also people. I mean, like anything else, if there's a citizen complaint, someone seeing someone do something, then that can be possibly looked at in regards to that.
Okay. And as is the case with any good law, if there's people clever enough, they can probably do something that's not legal. But yeah, okay, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Senator Hunt.
Not sergeant. I'm the only one. Just kidding.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer.
I will if you want me to.
That's stolen valor. That's not me. Would you support an amendment to this bill Senator Halloran's question about how will people know that this is the law, especially people who year after year, election after election have thought nothing of bringing to the drop box by the election commissioner the ballots of their mom and dad and brother who they live with. Like, of course, that would not feel like a crime to a person who has always done that their whole life or whatever. So his question made me think, would you guys support an amendment stating that, the ballot has to say this on it on the envelope somewhere as part of the instructions, just to make sure that there aren't any counties or anything that slip through the cracks and people don't know that they can't bring more than 2 ballots?
What I would say is I can't obligate the office on policy, but I'm happy to take it to the secretary and discuss that with you and any other senator that wants to in regards to the further consideration of this bill.
Thank you. It makes me think of a lot of other amendments too, like maybe we should require a camera facing the slot of every drop box. Maybe these videos should be made public record. Maybe there should be a YouTube channel where people can look at everybody returning their ballot. Like, there's just a lot of ideas to make it even more secure. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? All right, thank you for your testimony. All right, next testifier. Next proponent to LB 390. All right, we will transition to opponents to LB 390. Those in the neutral for LB. What category are you in? All right, come on up. If there's any other opponents, come forward so I know how many we have here and we can keep everybody in order. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Hello, Senator Brewer and members of the committee. My name is Arlo Hettle, ARLOHETTLE. I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Coordinator at the Nebraska Civic Engagement Table. We share some of the concerns that were brought up previously by some members of the committee about this bill, but we also want to add an additional concern, thinking about the implications here about limiting the time available for Nebraskans to vote by mail. And just wanted to share some data from the 2022 election to help shed light on just how popular mail-in voting is, because I know there can be some misconceptions about that. Vote by mail is popular in Nebraska among members of all parties. Almost 40% of the votes cast in the last election, which was over 250,000, were by mail. Half of those came from Republicans, 36% from Democrats, and 15% had an unknown or other party. Excluding the counties that vote exclusively by mail, the 5 counties that had the most voters voting by mail were Harlan, Gage, Wayne, Douglas, and Thayer, which is showing that vote by mail is popular in both rural and urban areas of the state. And vote by mail numbers are pretty consistent across all 3 congressional districts. Vote by mail is also particularly popular among the state's youngest and oldest voters. 31.2% of votes cast by 18 to 24-year-olds in the last election were by mail, as well as 51.2% of those aged 65 or older, and 5% of ballots in 2022 came from Nebraska's all-mail counties, which would be particularly affected by a shortening of the mail-in voting window. So we just really want to emphasize that there's no reason for the legislature to reduce the time Nebraskans have to take part in this proved and trusted voting method. Our work as an organization involves working with our members who are around 70 other nonprofits across the state to educate their communities about how to vote. And we see that every election, many citizens have questions about the voting options available to them, the time that they have to vote. And we just want to make it clear that it's important that there is time for voters to get this information, to do their research, and we don't need to be eliminating that. So we would ask you to not enact any measures that give Nebraskans less flexibility in exercising their right to vote, and encourage you to look at this part of 390 and vote against it if it limits the mail-in window. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Questions? Senator Reagan.
Yes, Mr. Hettle, thank you so much for coming. So could you talk a little bit more about limiting the number of days? Because I see right now it says 35 days prior.
Yeah, and this bill would lower it to 30 days.
Okay.
Which we know is for consistency reasons, but we think that perhaps the consistency could be increased rather than decreased.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next opponent, LB 390. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer and members of the committee. I understand that Senator Clements brought this bill at the request of the Secretary of State to, in part, harmonize some deadlines regarding the release of different types of ballots. We're
Can you
grateful.
get your name and
Heidi
spell?
Ewing, Uhing. First name is Heidi. I'm the Public Policy Director for Civic Nebraska. While we are grateful for our election officials' dedication to improving and streamlining their processes, so we are obligated to oppose 390, primarily because it would result in 5 fewer days of early voting. Civic Nebraska supports the voting rights of all Nebraskans, including access to voting by mail, which is growing in popularity and increasing participation in our elections, particularly in our 11 all vote by mail counties. These rural counties have consistently outpaced the Nebraska average in terms of turnout. In November 2022, voter turnout in these counties was at 69%, which is 14% higher than the rest of the state. Statewide, roughly 40% of voters cast their ballots early. Because voters clearly appreciate this convenience, we urge you to preserve the number of days that Nebraskans can vote by mail. And in response to the amendment brought to the hearing today, I share the concerns that have been discussed among the committee members already, as far as creating an environment of hostility around being helpful regarding people's votes.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Let's see if we have questions. Questions? All right, thank you for your testimony. Okay, any additional opponents to LB 390? Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. My name is Sarah, S-A-R-A, Freehoff, F-R-E-E-O-U-F. I'm in Crete, Nebraska. I'm almost 77 years old. In fact, this month I will be. I don't think I have missed voting in my entire life. However, I feel betrayed by what's happened to our elections. Basically, our elections, our right to vote secures all our other rights. And I think you as a committee doing what you're doing can make that better, or maybe not. We will see. What I want to convey to you today is a little kerfuffle I had with Governor Ricketts at a tailgate. I approached him about internet connectivity of our black box machines because we had tried in Saline County to get the CVRs from our county clerk and we were not able to. And we became aware that some of this was not what we had thought it was regarding the black boxes. And because ES&S is a company in Omaha that pretty much is the corporate ruler over our elections, I decided to confront the governor and tell him that they're internet connected. 3 times he told me, Sarah, it's a red herring. The 3rd time I gave him my teacher look. And I said, what are we going to do about this? And he handed me a card, which was Matt Miltenberger's card, and said, get back to him and then he'll contact me. So the letter you have is what I sent to Miltenberger. And so if you go to the link at the bottom, you will see the video that Governor Ricketts told me later at the steak fry that he had watched. I think he is now a believer that the machines are internet connected. And that's why I'm here today. Any of this stuff you people do, it's putting lipstick on a pig. And I'm a teacher. So I did an audio video for you. This is the solution. Simple, plain.
No displays. Go ahead and put it down.
No displays, all right.
Go ahead.
So do you have any questions?
Hang on, let's see if we have any questions for you. Thank you. Okay, questions? Yes, Senator
I just want to thank you, Senator Brewer. Ms. Freehoff, good to see you again. I saw you in education earlier this week, Senator Sanders and I did, but I see you had just a few simple words on the presentation materials that you brought. And if you wanted to just read them into the record, we can write them down here, but just wanted to, it looked like you had just, you just had a couple of quick,
Okay,
maybe
my
bullet
points are paper ballots only.
Okay. Yeah.
Same day voting. I think it's fine to have military and people that are disabled able to vote at distance. Everybody else needs to show up on one day, make it a holiday. We need to have precinct level vote counting. And I could go into detail about what happened after the November election in Saline County when we went down to watch the counting, but I won't bore you with that. Show a legal voter ID and no more machines.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Want to give you an opportunity to get
Thank
that in
you
the
for
record.
that. Yeah, Senator Conrad, thank you.
And we won't call it illegal. We just kind of have a policy.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, it's okay.
I'm a
you
teacher.
didn't.
I like audio
And
visuals.
you shared the information, so we appreciate that. So don't.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, thank you. Okay, next opponent to LB 390. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. committee members. My name is Rose Godinez, spelled Roseggodinez. I'm an attorney with the ACLU of Nebraska, testifying here on behalf of the ACLU. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy, and as such, we oppose any further restrictions on it, as they disproportionately impact rural voters, the elderly, people with disabilities, and another group of people that has not been mentioned by the committee and current members so far are people who are currently incarcerated and have the ability to vote. If there is going to be a time restriction on when ballots should be mailed, it should certainly be longer, not shorter. And in addition, we have worked previously with county jails, and oftentimes those ballots are returned in bulk. So oftentimes more than two. And that would disproportionately impact the voters sitting in our current county jails who have the legal right to vote. For those reasons, we urge the committee to indefinitely postpone this bill. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional opponents to LB 390? Anybody here in the neutral? All right, Senator Clements. Oh, okay.
Maybe two.
Are you in the neutral or opposed?
You said neutral?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Okay, is there anyone else here to testify on LB 390? You want to come forward to the front row up here, so we got you accounted for? All right, Amber, start whenever you're ready.
Okay. AMBER, PARKER. The connection to FTX is playing a part in Nebraska elections through the connections to the Center for Voter Information. The Center for Voter Information had mailed out unrequested ballot requests. It could be hundreds of thousands in Nebraska. And founder is none other than the former CEO of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried's mother, Barbara Fried. I found it interesting with the Secretary of State, Wayne Bana, of priding themselves, and I keep hearing it, in election integrity. We do not have that. We have a non-disclosure agreement with our voting machines presently, to where we, the people in all this room, we wouldn't know if anything were found in those machines. And it's been brought up that that's against the Constitution, the Nebraska Constitution, but it just seems that it's fluff speech when they come forward and trying to sell us a bill of goods. I want to come forward and let you know that there were 5 ballot requests that were not requested. 2 were from Sarpy County Election Office. 3 were from the Center for Voter Information. Now, again, I want to clarify that these are unrequested ballot requests. Why is this important, and why am I highlighting this? What would be the purpose of sending a registered voter an unrequested ballot request? And in cases, not just one, but multiple, as here, up to 3. From the Center for Voter Information, the mother, who's a co-founder, who just happens to be, is Sam Bankman-Fried's mother, who was the former CEO to FTX, and which FTX had, through their cryptocurrency exchange, and what their money laundering was, and we found out it went to Ukraine, came back, and then went into what? Super PACs, Republican and Democrat. My point being this, and why I'm testifying in the neutral side. Senator Hunt, you brought up a great point. We don't have cameras showing. If somebody wanted to set somebody up and say, hey, they were sending in multiple ballots and did this and had a connection within the government, how are they going to work? Due process or Constitution, right? How are they going to show that? We don't have any accountability. So 390, and in this area, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of foundation are we building? I mean, if somebody can be facing felony charges in these areas, the reality what the Secretary of State should be looking at is what is going on with the Center for, I want to say the right name, a Center for Voter Information, and the connection. And why are they not paying attention to the multiple ballots? Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Center for Voter Information's name is on that. Their name has been on the unrequested ballot requests, and there are envelopes on this. Furthermore, I want to address this. Why are there different bulk mail permits? Which means it came from different organizations, the name of the person that received it. Their name was in different form, but for an example, John Smith III. Another example, and these are just examples to give you an idea. They take a name, they combine them, and then they try to make them look different, but it's to the same address and the same person. Another example, if it was Sunset View, one word, but then separating them into two words, Sunset View. This right here is something that needs to be investigated. This is huge. And I have a question. Why in the world are people from out of state mailing people in Nebraska? And it's not just Nebraska. You know, Barbara Freed, she had helped with the Mind the Gap, and I'd have to look at in other areas, but Civic Nebraska is well aware of Center for Voter Information. They're also aware of Get Out the Vote. We need to secure our elections in these areas. And right now, the focus of what needs to take place, LB 390 is not putting a focus on these areas, and it is in concerns of felony as well. I believe that there are areas that could help right now, but it's putting a Band-Aid on like something leaking and not taking out the cancer of what's going on. And what's going on is not being addressed, and we need to get to the bottom of this. The Sarpy County Election Office, why? Why was there anything coming from the Sarpy County Election Office in these areas as well that were unrequested ballot requests? I haven't heard many get to that point, and I would encourage, thank you.
Hang on, let's see if we have questions. Thank you for testimony. Okay, questions. All right, thank you. Okay. Next, neutral testimony on LB 390. Welcome back to the Government Committee.
Hello, Connie Ranke, CONNIEREINKE. Yesterday, I presented really quickly. I am neutral on this. I believe that there is some good points being brought up and being taken care of. But I want to tell you, we are in an emergency situation with our elections. And Senator Halloran's Bill 193, I support that. This situation needs to be taken care of, not in Band-Aids. It needs to be taken care of and securing our elections. Yesterday, the first graph that I showed you was more votes over the population, not just more registrations over the population. Votes per age, there were more votes than the population. This is red flag. I mean, this stuff is, it's maddening that we're not getting investigations on these things. Dr. Frank tried to meet with the Secretary of State. The Nebraska Voter Accuracy has tried to meet with the Secretary of State to show this algorithm, which is like a recipe. It's a programming that's done, which reflects that chart that was shown yesterday, that shows more votes than people, the population in certain areas. This is proven. It's happening all over the country, in every county, in every state. It's a pattern of voting that is a red flag, a huge. It's like I was trying to understand this myself because I'm not a mathematician. These graphs, what they show is if you had kindergartners a graph of kindergartners that were 3.5 feet tall. And then you had a 7-foot kindergartner. That shows that there's a major, major problem. It's a red flag. So this needs to be looked into. So you have these algorithms that are showing that there's major problems. And then the stuffing of ballots, which this bill has to do with, and is eliminating some of the problems. But what happens is the election machines have an algorithm in them, and that means it's not a natural vote. It's programmed. And then what they do, you've heard of the 2,000 mules. The ballots come in to fill in and match the votes because they know who the people are that the machines have selected. Then the stuffed ballots come in and make the ballots match. This happens in the 2020 election. Our elections, it took many days to actually complete. And during this time, the votes are being matched. Early mail drop-off voting is where much of the fraud occurs. There's a report done by Dr. Shiva, and I did bring something from that where much of the fraud occurs. In this example here, we've talked about multiple ballots and duplicates. In Maricopa, there were 0 duplicates reported when they did the election. When Dr. Shiva examined the mail-in ballot envelopes, he actually found 17,322 duplicate or multiple ballots. It was 2, 3, and 4. And some of them had signature areas where they were blank and there were duplicates of them. Now, this hasn't been done in Nebraska, but we have had evidence, and I myself personally have found 16 persons that had multiple ballots that they received in the mail. And so this bill is about mail-in ballots, and that's the concern I have, and that's why I'm neutral on this.
Okay. All right, Connie, thank you for testimony. Okay, so this sheet here that you just identified, this is Arizona numbers from that roll up there.
There is a full report, and I would like to get that to you as well.
But this one here that has the different columns, this is what again?
This is a cast vote record. We've been denied over 250 times from election clerks across the state of Nebraska that have reported that we don't have this record. We looked in the statutes, and it says that we can examine the summary of votes cast. We believe that this is the record. ES&S machines have cast vote records in their manual, and other states with ES&S machines have received cast vote records. What this does is it shows if there's a controlled vote or if it's a random vote. And we have not been able to get that in Nebraska.
And this last page that you have with the yellow highlighting, that is what again?
Sure. This is when someone is able to get the cast vote record. This is what I handed out yesterday, the report I handed out, and I just highlighted the end of this. These cast vote records, everyone that they have has shown a progressive decline, mathematically impossible for random arriving mail-in ballots. The mail-in ballot counting was manipulated in Pima County, Arizona by recording ballots in mathematically impossible order, which created a progressively declining Democrat-Republican ratio for almost all races. And I might just say, this isn't about Democrat or Republican. This is about freedom versus enslavement to these machines, because they're controlling our elections. And it's proven all over the country. And
Okay,
so
thank you.
that's what I.
Let's see if we have any questions for
Sure.
you, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Reinke, for being here.
Sure.
So these requests for cast ballot vote, cast vote record, you've not been able to get those?
No.
And the reasons that they give you for that is?
We request that from the county election clerks, and they have said that the record doesn't exist, or they don't know how to run the report. Those are the main two reasons. So we resubmitted request and said, we'd like what you say in the statutes. It's called the summary of votes cast. It's been denied again. We asked, whatever it's called, whatever this record is called, that's what we'd like. It shows each voter, number one voter, how they voted in all the way down the ballot. Voter number two, how they voted all the way down. So it doesn't have their name, but it has 1, 2, 3, 4, all the ballots. We don't want just a total number of ballots. It doesn't tell it, we're not able to tell anything from that. When it's broke down that way, we can tell if it was random voting or if it was like a controlled to a certain point.
So they're saying that the software and the voting machines won't accommodate that report?
Yeah. And if you look at the, it's called the CVR report for dummies. There's a picture of the screen of electionware, which is what's used in the election offices. And you go down to export and it has CVR report. So I don't know what's so complicated about it, about printing out this report. I'm wondering if it's proprietary based on the election machines. If that's the excuse for not, giving us this record, I don't know, but I've been working 1.5 years nonstop trying to understand this. And this is destroying our country. And it's destroying everyone, not just the people that say that there's a problem with the elections. This is destroying our whole country. And it's an emergency situation. When I began, I didn't understand all these graphs. I didn't understand because I'm not a mathematician. But I've listened to that DVD that I handed out to all of you at least 30 times, and I understand it now. So I encourage you to watch that DVD.
Right.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, Connie, thank you for your testimony. Let's see, we are still on those in the neutral capacity. Are there any additional neutral positions? If not, we will read our 4 proponents, 9 opponents, 1 in the neutral on LB 390. That will close on LB 390. I will hand the gavel over to the vice chair. all these people came in for a Bennett bill.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Sanders and fellow members of the Government Committee. I am Senator Tom Brewer. For the record, that is Tombrewer. I'm here representing 11 counties of the 43rd Legislative District of Western Nebraska. I'm also here today to introduce LB 514. I'm introducing this cleanup bill. I know you guys hear that a lot. This is literally a legitimate cleanup bill. On behalf of the Secretary of State, this bill includes a number of administrative election updates brought to me by the Secretary of State. Let's see. If you guys look through, there's 40 some pages to LB 514. And I know it's a long day. If you look through, it's little bitty things here and there. So to try and give you some long opening speech on it, it's near impossible. So I am going to forego the torment and just simply say that I will be followed by the Secretary of State's representative, who will be more than willing to go into those details unless you have some questions you need me to answer at this time.
Are there any questions?
thank you
Senator
for
Heller?
Vice Chair. You spelled your name. Could you spell it again?
Brewer. All right, I will stay for closing, even though I don't need to. Thank you.
Do my opening remarks while the pages pass out around. What you really want to see is the summary. So my name is Wayne Bena, W-A-Y-N-E, B-E-N-A, B-E-N-A, W-A-Y-N-E. Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, here on behalf of Secretary of State Robert Ebnen in support of LB 514. This, for the members that are new and returning, and this is a bill that starts the day after the last legislative session and goes until a bill is introduced, usually on the 8th, 9th, or 10th day. And it is a collaboration between the Secretary of State's office, the county election officials, NACO, sometimes the League of Municipalities, such as today, to find the little things in administration of elections that can be fixed and tweaks after we go through an election year that are non-controversial. Pooled together so there's not 40 bills and 40 hearings and a consent calendar just on elections. But put together to save time so that each individual one doesn't have to be its own bill and its own hearing. I always like to give credit where credit is due. Ben Larson, my election specialist, is in charge of what we call the list. Someone will call me, I will read an article, and I will probably yell out, Ben, add this to the list. And that's how December of every year we start to put together this omnibus bill. So what I've passed before you are two things. One is the summary sheet and one is a table of contents so that if there's a certain topic that interests you more than others, you can go right to it and we can tell you exactly what page number it's at. And I'm going to go off of the summary sheet to streamline this process. And then, yes, I will not be 4 in a row of not hitting the yellow light on this one. And so with that, I'll go through. I'm going to have some amendments to talk about in a minute, and I can have those passed around now as well, things that we found after the introduction. So First section is regards to remonstrance petitions. That is a creature of cities and villages, and a representative of the League of Municipalities will be coming in after me to talk specifically about that one. Something that we did a few years ago, they wanted to expand to first-class cities. They will be happy to talk about that. But again, it is one of those instances in which we added to this bill, one less hearing for all of you in regards to this. That's something that's simple. Next section is in regards to city initiatives. It requires city clerks to immediately notify their county election official upon receipt of a municipal petition. While the municipal petitions happen at the municipal level, the county election office will be in charge of determining how many registered voters, and they also need to be ready to maybe hire temporary employees, especially if this was brought to us here in Lancaster County, in which Lincoln City petitions were brought forward, and the Lancaster County Election Commissioner did not know they were coming until they came, that they were turned in. So this would provide the city provided a little bit of notice so they can run their reports and have staffing ready to be able to do the actual processing of the petition pages. Sections 3, 4, and 39 are from the revisor's office to incorporate new sections of the Election Act. It's the standard language from the revisors. Section 5, 6, 36, and 37 is in regards to electioneering. We are not changing anything in the election statutes. That's something that was highly negotiated 2 years ago. We thought it would be better to put something as well into the definition sections of the Election Act so people could, in the definitions, know what electioneering is. Yesterday, I was approached by the Civic Engagement Table in regards to an amendment they wanted to this. They were fine with, and I have a letter that I said I would provide, so they didn't have to be here today, and I agreed to their language changes. They believe that adding the initiative type language to a definition is in conflict with IRS code in regards to what actual it's lobbying of initiative petitions rather than electioneering. We are still going to be banning electioneering in regards to campaigning for initiative petition within 200 feet of a polling site, but it's technically not electioneering under IRS code. So there's electioneering, and then there's going to be also the campaigning of initiative petitions in the same manner. I agreed to those, and those amendments are placed in there, and we'll work with committee council if this bill were to get out to have those changed. So it's just very minor in nature. Under the Help America Vote Act, if you register to vote by mail for the first time in the state of Nebraska and do not provide an address verification document, we are required to ask for said address verification document. And if you don't, you have to bring such address identification to the polling site when you vote on election day or you vote provisionally. What this does is it says that a voter can provide that electronically instead of having to mail it or put it or bring it into the office. So so that's just keeping up with the times of it. Regardless of I want to say is regardless of what happens with the voter ID, this is federal law in regards to this. So an address confirmation document helps to confirm your address where you live in the registration process. So this will not change in law. Some people have said in the voter ID law, you can just bring your utility bill. That's only for registration purposes for the specific instance of registering to vote for the first time by mail in Nebraska. So the arguments you've heard about that, and you will hear about that, have nothing to do with voter ID. It has to do with registration. So, so we're just allowing folks to be able to digitally email that to the election office. Third-party mailer return envelopes. We have had an issue, and this is not only third parties, but also political parties. They will send early ballot applications to voters, which is a completely legal under the First Amendment thing that a campaign or third party can do. However, these early ballot applications are then sent back to the organization first and not to the election office. And then once at the election office, they are then sent to the organization or political party or what have you, then are sent off to the election office. This can create some time crunches in regards to voters who believe that they may have sent it to the election office in time to get the early ballot, when in fact it went to a different address of the organization that sent the mailing in the first place, and it didn't get to the office in time. This would state clearly that these third-party applications need to go directly to an election office and not to the organization sending them first. So this is to make sure that the voter is getting the application, and they may not know that it's a third party giving them the application, and they blame the election office for not sending them the ballot when they never got it in the first place. Next section, section 9, we're harmonizing that while under 25-1654, we last session changed the voter file to only allow the date of the birth year as being public record. But for jury lists, they do need the full birth date. We do provide that, but we're putting it back into 32-330 that birth dates, full birth dates are allowed for jury purposes because they need that to match up with DMV records so you can get jury duty. So, which I still haven't gotten yet. So next is we're just moving some, some language in another section about election maps into the correct section of where you would expect to see it. Sometimes we find an election law that a specific law got changed, but the language should probably be in a different section because that's where you're looking for it. So again, maps that have to be provided to election offices, we're moving it to the section that best fits of where you would find it. So next one, candidate names. This one's a little more substantive. If all of you at one point filled out a filing form with our office, and if you took a look at the back of that filing form, you might remember there's a long half-page list of an attorney general's opinion of what name conformity that you can use on the ballot, whether or not, Robert, Bob, Wayne, nothing short for that, sorry. But what you're normally known as in the community, or if you want to use your maiden name instead of your married name, or a combination of two. Those are all outlined in Attorney General's opinion. It has actually never been put into law. And so we thought to put all of those into law. After we submitted that, we did another look, and we'd had some language changes in regards to how we codify that. And that's the second part of the amendment. Actually, we gave that to bill drafters, and they had something available, but it was 48 pages long with everything else. I wasn't going to go ahead and provide that to you, but we cut out just the stuff that we had amended and gave it to you in the summary sheet. But that's what we're asking, just to be amended into that. Candidate petition end date. I've brought to the attention of this committee before that there are some petitions that never have an end date, even though the election in which they were trying to do it for has passed. I brought it to new party petitions a few years back. I think I remember the joke that I made with Senator Hunt about you could go into your grandfather's trunk and find Bull Moose Party and still do those petitions and pages. Candidate petitions, we end on the election date and the date in which they were due for that election, and you have to start over. So Hall County election commissioner, and she will be testifying, brought to our attention allowing email notification to candidates who were nominated by petition to simplify the process and minimize the time versus having to send a certified letter. An old court case, Stenberg versus Moore in 1999, allowed for ditto marks to be used on the address line of an initiative petition if you and then your spouse just dittoed afterwards. The language was never taken out of the law. And so sometimes my team is reading through the law and realizing there's been a lawsuit taking it out, and we just need to take it out of the law. So that's what the ditto marks are. Petition name removals. If you sign any type of petition and then decide later that you don't want your name associated with it, you can file something with the filing officer in regards to removing your name. So even if it is verified, it's not counted. This clarifies what office you would actually file that with, and some additional language added by the revisor to help out with this process. Next, we've had a couple of instances in the last, since I've been here in the last 5.5 years, in which sponsors for an initiative petition have wanted to add or subtract people based upon, let's say, a death, or a person didn't want to be associated with the petition anymore. We had no mechanism into state law to actually allow for it. We honored it. We actually placed it in the file with everything else. But this allows for an actual mechanism to add someone as a sponsor or to remove someone as a sponsor to an initiative petition. Election notices. We require political subdivisions. The counties need to send a notice to all the political subdivisions letting them know that we received your filings and here's what the race is on the ballot. We just want to make sure the auto advancing races go on to that notice as well, so they're not missed by the political subdivision, so they know what's going on. This one is probably the most substantive and something that I'm probably the most proud of in regards to this bill. This would allow any naturalized citizen who is naturalized after the voter registration deadline to be able to go to the county election office, provide that certificate, that citizenship paperwork, be able to register to vote and vote a provisional ballot in the office in order to vote in that election. This came to us in 2020. There was a naturalization ceremony here in Lincoln that just so happened to happen after the voter registration date. And unfortunately, all those people who registered to vote weren't eligible to vote in that election by no instance of the scheduling of that naturalization ceremony. So we're providing a mechanism for our newly naturalized citizens to be able to register to vote and vote when it had nothing to do with themselves. You just heard this in the last bill, but we put it into this bill as well. It clarifies that all ballots are non-forwardable mail and first-class postage. That means they get the first priority to go out. And also, we don't want ballots. If you happen to move and don't change your address on your registration, we don't want your old address ballot going to your new address because it's a completely different ballot. And it allows us the opportunity to allow the voter to change their registration. We got a request from the counties that are completely by mail. We had done a bill a few years ago that all drop boxes had to be open once early voting started. Well, in the counties that are completely by mail, they don't start until 20 days when they mail out the ballot. So this says that you don't have to necessarily keep them open for the 2 weeks that nothing's going to be put in them. So it clarifies when they have to actually be open in the by mail counties. Next, recall election costs. We've had a couple instances in which we have political subdivisions have gone all the way to doing the verification, and it didn't meet it, but they didn't have the ability to charge anyone for that work. And so this would allow the counties to bill the political subdivisions associated with the recall if a petition is issued. Right now, you cannot bill unless the member is recalled or resigns. So if it's not recalled right now, you can't recover those costs. So this says you can't recover those costs because they can be extensive. We found some interesting language that for offices, there are certain offices that can be recalled, and for those that file with our office, there's nothing specific saying that people can file with our office for those entities that file with our office that can be recalled. It says with the county. And so most of the people that file with our office are multi-county type of races, or they represent districts in multi-counties. This is just saying is for those natural resource districts, irrigation districts, those that can be recalled that file with our office, the recall petitions are specifically filed with our office and not with the county. Finally, initiative petition affidavits. We are requiring, we worked with this body in regards to the initiative process to come up with a process in which once initiative petitions are turned in, the sponsor just needs to sign an affidavit saying that they have turned in the minimum amount of signatures that if all of them were counted or are all accepted, that you would make the ballot. This was to prevent situations that we have had in the past in which initiative petitions have not even turned in the minimum number at all by tens of thousands. And it was a complete waste of the county election officials' time to verify petitions that never would have had any chance to make it. This clarifies that this sponsorship statement needs to make sure it conform, that when you're turning it in, that you have the minimum of not only, that you're conforming with what the Constitution says of what a valid petition goes on the ballot, not only the minimum number of signatures statewide, but of the current 5% of 38 counties as well, and provides a penalty if you false swear on that document. So we just want to make sure that the intent was that you're turning in a petition that you believe meets all constitutional requirements, and that's what we want codified in regards to this. That is it. This is probably the smallest omnibus bill I've ever had, and I hope that, oh, that's not 5 minutes. It's probably the smallest omnibus bill I've ever had, because the hope is each and every year that I bring one, there's less and less things we actually have to change. But as we found, as yesterday when I brought up a few bills in regards to things, because we haven't had an election since 1951, we're going to find little tweaks here and there. So this is not the most important bill that you're going to see, but I think this is a good starting point for a lot of, I like putting it together because I get to work with a lot of different organizations and our county election officials and NACO and the League of Municipalities put together. But it's also a way that we can also work together. You know, someone calling me outside yesterday saying they just want a little bit of a tweak. Absolutely happy to bring it so you don't have to come and testify, because I have to be here. You don't necessarily have to. So it's a good way to bring, it's a nice, simple bill to negotiate, but put other stuff on. And if it happens to get a committee priority, I love that too as well. So with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Senator Rainbow.
Well, I just have a couple of really quick questions. On the mail drop boxes in section 25, you talk about are opened according to section 32-960, at least 10 days. I know in Lancaster County, I mean, that maybe I'm interpreting it completely wrong, but the drop boxes, they're open probably every 4 hours. And you're talking about the votes inside the drop boxes?
No, what we're saying is that we require, when there's not an election, most drop boxes have a guard, so you can't just throw trash in there or what have you. So we require them to be open during the early voting period. Starting when mail ballots start going out, so 35 days. What this is saying is in those counties that are completely by mail, they start sending the ballots out 20 days before the election, according to the rules and regs associated with by mail precincts. So they just didn't want to necessarily open up their ballot boxes earlier than they needed to. So this is just clarifying, you just need to open your ballot boxes ready for collection when your ballots start going out.
I just think, well, if they get full, you need to open them and empty them, but that's.
Oh, this has to be just open them so the ballots can be deposited in them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. I see. Got it. Okay. And then there's another one, initiative petition affidavits. You're talking about statewide initiatives. Okay. Because I know in Lancaster County, if you have a initiative, you can keep dropping them off. So it gives them more time to verify the signatures collected. But this is only the
initiative
statewide.
on the state. It's you turn them all in at the same time. And all you're doing is just saying, hey, we want sponsors of a petition to actually count go through a verification process. We're not saying you're not certifying that you're going to make the ballot or not make the ballot. You're just saying is if the number of signatures required to get on the ballot is 1 million, you've turned in at least 1 million signatures. And so I'm not in. So because we have had situations in which it required 1 million and they turned in 500,000, for example, and we had to verify those, and it took up a lot of time, money, and resources of our county election officials when it was never going to make the ballot, and I had no way of stopping it. So,
Okay, thank you for a really good point by point, section by section. I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rainbow. Are there any other questions? Mr. Bennett, so the white copy or the amendment, were you going to review that with us?
yeah, the
Need a copy?
I didn't keep one for myself.
You need one, right?
Yeah.
Here you go.
He's got it.
Okay.
So what we allowed, so again, we cut some language out initially. The Attorney General's opinion did say, and by which the candidate is distinguished from others. So we put that back in. That's what the Attorney General's position. Some of this other has to do with, and I didn't, we actually never had a mechanism in state law that if someone changed their name between the primary and general election, that they could have the ability to change their name. And that might be a situation when that occurs. So this would just also allow for a person to turn in documentation to our office requesting that their name be changed on the ballot. And then just like that there's a filing objection, there'd be an objection deadline by a candidate or by someone regarding that. And so these were some of the some of the things brought to us by our revisor and then internally within our office to fix those portions, to conform then questions that were brought to us by the revisor after the fact when we were looking at amending this. The other document you have is from this civic engagement table that I agreed to make the changes that they requested in regards to separating separating initiative petition from the electioneering definition, but still saying that you can't do that, what they say, lobbying of that effort within 200 feet or within the same amount of feet as a campaign person would from a polling site. And those are the changes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? See none. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Just the one up here. Welcome.
It'll be quick. You covered it pretty good. Oh, excuse me. You're welcome.
Proponent as well.
Correct. Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer, members of the committee. My name is Brian Cruz, BRIAN-KRUSE. I am here as co-chair of the NACO Clerks, Register of Deeds and Election Commissioners, Legislation Committee, as well as the Douglas County Election Commissioner. I'm here to testify in support of LB 514. I would like to thank Senator Brewer for introducing this bill, which has numerous components that will help clarify election laws. There is generally a bill introduced each session to help further define election laws and clean up minor irregularities in the Election Law Act. I'll just touch on a couple of these that Mr. Bennett touched on. These two that I'm going to touch on specifically benefit voters. The first one is individuals who become United States citizen after the voter registration deadline, but before the election takes place, will now be able to go to their election office and exercise their right to vote. Currently in the bill, we've talked to Mr. Bennett about this. Currently in the bill, it says that they would only be able to do that up until noon, 12 p.m. on the Monday before the election. And we would just like to move that to close of business on that Monday. So they have that full day to do that. And he's been agreeable to that. So minor change there. And then voters who need to provide additional documents to register to vote will now be able to provide those documents via email. So like he said, voters who register for the first time by mail, if they need to provide a document to us, they can now, rather than mailing it through the US mail or bringing it in, now they can email it to us. So it's just another convenience for the voter. Hopefully speed that process up for their voter registration too, and get that done quicker for them. So in conclusion, LB 514 may not be exciting, but it is an important bill. and I urge this committee to advance it to general file. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Are there any questions? See none. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairwoman Sanders, committee. I appreciate the time. I'm Tracy Overstreet, Tracy. Overstreet is O-V as in Victor, E-R-S-T-R-E-E-T. I am the Hall County Election Commissioner in Grand Island. I also serve on the Election Law Committee for NACO's County Clerks, Register of Deeds, and Election Commissioners group. I'm here today in support of LB 514. There are several positive changes from Nebraska Secretary of State's office that's included in this bill. We strongly support the listing of local election offices as the recipient of voter registration documents. That's page 8, line 18. We have had instances in the past in Hall County where election documents are distributed by third-party organizations with a return envelope back to the third-party organization. That does create a delay on processing the documents. It can also lead to voter confusion if the voter calls to check up on documents and our office hasn't even received the document yet. In many cases, the third party will hold applications or registrations until there's a bulk number to return. In Hall County's case, we've had one that held up to 700, and we got 700 in one day rather than getting 20, 30, 40 documents in a day. We had one big data dump of 700 in a day, which is hard to process. It creates a backlog then. By listing local election offices and their addresses on the return envelope, there will be timely, accurate return of applications and registrations, and we can also be more informative to our voters. We also strongly support allowing late registration for new citizens, page 26, line 21. Shortly after I started as election commissioner about 5 years ago, a new citizen and naturalization ceremony was hosted at a Grand Island high school. It was on a Saturday night, happened to be the day after the registration deadline, and that was really heartbreaking. The proposal here would allow for new citizens to register to vote the day before an election and will provide the flexibility and also show support for those new citizens. Mr. Cruz just talked about changing the time frame from noon the day before the election to the end of business. I think with 2 different time zones across the state of Nebraska, changing that language to close of business is more understandable to all voters and administrators, election administrators across the state. I apologize in my letter that one of the things that I did ask Mr. Bennett to include, he talked about the email notification. I did not include in my letter. And that's really important. We've had different petition instances in Hall County, and there are a lot of timelines in the petition process, both to start and stop processes. And we had one that we weren't really able to stop because everybody knew it was ended, but we hadn't had the certified letter or the deputy track down the person yet to give a letter. So the email notification, really a sign of the times, would be very beneficial and a cost savings to taxpayers, I think, as well. So we appreciate that being included in 514 and encourage you to advance 514. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? See none. Thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Again.
Again. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Sanders, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Beth, B-E-T-H, Bazin, B-A-Z-Y-N, Farrell, F-E-R-R-E-L-L. I'm with the Nebraska Association of County Officials, and I'm appearing in support of this bill. We'd like to thank Senator Brewer for carrying the bill, and we'd also like to thank the Secretary of State for dealing with all of these issues that help fine-tune elections. This is a list we appreciate being on, and we appreciate always being able to rely on them to take care of these issues for us so that we don't have to bring you a whole host of little bills. With that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? See none. Thank you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Vice Chair Sanders and the committee. First, I want to thank Senator Brewer and the Secretary of State's office for introducing this through the omnibus bill. My name is Wes Blakey, Wesbleckke. I work for the City of Wayne as a city administrator. And I'm here to fully support 514, but I'm going to specifically, my testimony will focus on the language of the first-class cities, the remonstrance process regarding petitions. So our quick story here. In the fall of 2021, the City of Wayne solicited a request for proposals for an 8-acre tract of land of city-owned land. The City of Wayne, like so many other rural communities, are struggling with housing and are in great need of all types of housings in their communities. After a review process of 2 developers that submitted proposals to us and going through the legal steps to sell or to enter into a purchase agreement for the property, a petition drive to void the purchase was started by a member of the community. While the petition leader was receiving his own legal advice on how to go about the process, city personnel heard early on that they were only planning to apply section 16202 to the process. 16202 does not define what a petition should look like, other than stating only 20 signatures per page will be counted. The city, including its attorney, believed that that since the county election commissioner would have to get involved in counting the signatures per section 32-628, the petition process would have to follow the law like that of any other petition carried through other petitions to the state of Nebraska. The short of the story was section 32-628 was not followed by the petition carriers, and a possible legal argument was brewing. Luckily for the city, the petition did not gain enough valid signatures. Had enough valid signatures been collected, the city council would have been in a difficult situation because it had concerns about how the process had been handled from the beginning. And since section 16202 states the council ultimately, after a hearing, would have to validate the petition. So in conclusion, simply cross-referencing the petition requirement from section 32-628 by including it in the remonstrance statute in 16202 will help clarify the law and make the process much clearer for both the city as well as petition carriers. So with that, I would take any questions you have from me.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Do you have a copy of your testimony? Would you mind sharing that with the committee via email?
I sure do. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You had some numbers in there I don't want to forget. Thank you.
So it's clear.
Gladly do that.
Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony. Are there others? Proponent, opponent, neutral, closing?
All right. I don't want to say it was a boring bill, but I fell asleep during Bennett's comments, and I was so desperate, I went to Morante's website to see if any leftover cash anywhere. So, any questions?
Are there any questions, Senator Brewer? Senator Halloran?
Did you have any left?
No, but I did find my nephew had $250, so I plan to take half of it.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. We do want for the record, letters sent in, 1 proponent, 0 opposed, 0 neutral. Thank you. We now conclude LB 514.